Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a new Cardfight Vanguard video for you guys today. Today we've got another episode review, and this time we've got Season 2, Episode 6. And this is going to be a good one, because this is the first episode where we actually have all of the effects for every card that's played in this episode. So in this episode, it was Vanguard Divinez versus Impaldio. This is the new Destined one of Exceedance. It faded one of Unparalleled. This card and its support got revealed early because of the fact that the set actually just dropped yesterday. So they turboed out the last few cards just to make sure that all the cards were revealed before the set dropped in Japan. And it actually helps with this one because now we can really go into detail on what these characters did during this fight. So I hope you guys enjoy this kind of video. If you do, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's jump in and let's talk about the episode. So the episode starts off with Now looking at a full album of previous competitions. You could see her with trophies and whatnot, and it freeze frames on one picture in particular, which actually shows her with her destined opponent, which is Senka Kane. Hope I said that right. It turns out they've been competing for a while. It shows a quick clip of her phone, and it says, fade one from parallel, destined one of Exceedance. So she knew who her opponent was from the get-go, and I guess they've had a rivalry for a while. It jumps over to Now and Akina at the restaurant they work at, and they're talking about obviously the Destined Showdown, and they're talking about Now's relationship with Senka. It turns out they competed in many tournaments. They were always pretty even, and they always went back and forth on victories. And eventually Senka moved away. Upon moving away, Senka basically looked at Now and said, after Now had beat her in a competition, that she was gonna go pro, and that she wanted to face Now once Now became a pro as well, and that she was going to exceed Now. That was like her whole thing throughout the whole episode. Now has a little bit of self-doubt because Senka did become a pro, and she's actually a very successful pro, whereas Now never became a pro. So Now she gets shaky for a minute, but then kind of shakes it off. We actually get a quick clip of Megumi from Overdress going to her shop, and she's excited because she's like, maybe I'll get there to be able to be there for the shop tournament. As she's getting there, we see Senka walk out. Megumi walks in, and Senka just decimated the whole shop. Everybody got their ass whooped. And then we go over to Senka, and she's talking about facing Now, and she reminisces about her rivalry with Now, and how every time they would meet in tournaments, obviously they would end up facing off no matter what. They always end up happening. It's funny because even IRL, I have friends who, no matter what tournament they are in, they always end up facing each other. It quickly jumps over to the nighttime. It's now time for their Destined Showdown, and as Now's already at the podium ready to fight, Senka's walking up, and Kuon talks to her, basically saying, you're a pro who's super successful, and you're considered a prodigy. It doesn't even seem like the two of you are in the same league. And Senka just says, don't underestimate her ever, and just walks off. And Jinky is suspicious. Jinky basically calls out Kuon, because basically at the beginning of every fight, I guess you could say Kuon's kind of like reiterating the motivations of the Destined ones. So it's just like Jinky calls it a little weird. Kuon kind of says, we're allies, so he's just trying to hype them up. Jinky ain't about that. Jumps over to Taizo, and obviously Taizo is another professional card fighter, so he talks about Senka, and basically he's never played Senka, but he's heard about her, and talks about how strong she is, seen her results. She's kind of a beast. Anyway, now we jump over to the fight, and this is where things get, they get fun. So we get to see their starters. Now, of course, has Heated Blade Ardheart, and Senka, her starter's name is Falstratter. Hope I said that right. I'm probably gonna edit this in, so sorry if you see the jump. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the fight, which I normally do in every fight, but my bad. They don't emphasize that they draw for turn or energy charge, but they use energy blast skills. So, just as it is a mandatory game mechanic, just assume that they draw for turn every turn and that the energy charge 3. Okay, back to the fight. Turn 1, Senka goes first. Senka rides Progret, and she uses its skill immediately when she plays it. The skill is when this unit is placed by riding from a grade 0, reveal a grade 3 card with Impuldio in its card name from your ride deck. Put a system code exceed. Sorry, system code exceed. It's X-CEED. You put the token into your order zone. Now, I'm going to tell you what the system code does because it becomes important throughout the entire game. It's a continuous order zone. You cannot ride grade 3 or greater card without Impuldio in its card name, and you can get self-modification gauges. This is the whole mechanic of the deck. Auto order zone. When a card is put into your damage zone, during your opponent's turn, choose a card from your drop, put it face up in your self-modification gauge. Then, if you have 3 or less self-modification gauges and a trigger unit was not revealed for this damage check, choose one of your vanguards and it gets 5,000 power until end of turn. If you have 4 or more self-modification gauge, choose one of your vanguards and it gets 5,000 power until end of turn. So when I first read this, I thought, when you have 3 gauges, your vanguard gets 5k. When you have 4 or more, you get 10k. That's what I thought originally. So the way it's actually worded is, up until you get 3, you get the 5k if you don't hit a damage trigger. 4 and more, you get the 5k even if you hit a damage trigger, because the first half of the effect doesn't activate anymore because you have more than 3. That's how that actually is supposed to work. So this is a kind of defensive mechanic. Basically, for taking damage, you can get stronger to make it easier to defend. It's good against multi-attack decks. All right. So, like I said, Senka rides her grade 1, gets her system code exceed, ends turn. By the way, the token is not in the deck. You basically, it kind of pulls itself out. You pull it out once you ride grade 1. But turn 2, now rides Blaze Ember Dragon. She calls Monk of Raging Flames Kofu. Now attacks with Blaze Ember. Senka doesn't guard. Now doesn't get a trigger. And Senka takes 1 damage. Doesn't get a damage trigger. Now Senka activates her system code exceed. She puts a draw trigger from her drop zone into the self-modification gauge and gives her Vanguard 5,000 power. Already showing off what it can do, because now Kofu, the grade 1 that now had called, can't hit. So Senka basically runs through the explanation of her self-modification gauges, and she describes it as her deck is constantly learning and evolving through pain and experience, which I think is a pretty cool way to, announce the gimmick. But now ends her turn. The damage is now 0-1 with now in the lead. Turn 3, Senka rides her grade 2, Doris Evolia. And then she calls Nebula Invoke Dragon. She attacks with Doris, now guards. Senka doesn't get a trigger. Senka attacks with Nebula Invoke Dragon and uses the skill. We actually don't see her announce that she's using the skill, but you can tell because one of her cards from her soul ends up in her drop zone. Its skill is auto rearguard when this unit attacks, Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets 5,000 power until end of turn. If you have 5 or more self-modification gauges, it gets 15,000 instead of 5,000. But now also guards this attack, turns over. The damage is still 0-1, now it's still in the lead. We're going to turn 4. This game goes by really, really fast because these are such aggressive decks. They just call out cards, swing away. Not like some of the other decks that we see in the series where they're doing a bunch of different combo calls and doing a bunch of cool shit. They're basically just slap down the board, swing away. Alright, turn 4, now rides Boulder Axe Dragon. Now uses Blaze Ember Dragon's skill. Auto, when this unit is rode upon by Boulder Axe Dragon, call it to rearguard, Soul Charge 1. Now calls Blaze Ember behind her Vanguard, moves to her Kofu back, and calls Drag Rider Sure in front of it. She attacks with her Vanguard, Senka doesn't guard. Now doesn't get a trigger, Senka takes 1 damage. Doesn't get a trigger, and uses her self-modification gauges again. She binds another card from her drop, and gives her Vanguard 5k. Now attacks with Shara, this one Senka guards. It's an easier guard because of the plus 5k. The damage is 0-2, now still in the lead. Now tries to reminisce with Senka, and Senka basically calls her out for not giving her all to become a pro. She explains that every time she's ever beaten now, it's basically been something that's outside of their actual skill. Where it was, now bricked. Now was trying a weird tech that threw her deck off. Or she wasn't even playing her main deck. So she never really felt like she beat now. So she wants to play now at her best and beat her that way. And this is where we get to see her motivation really go into full swing. Senka rides Destined 1 of Exceedance Impuldio. Senka uses Doris Evola's skill on ride. Auto, when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 with Impuldio in its card name, with the top card of your deck, face up into your modification gauge, then choose one of your self modification gauges, and you may put it into your hand. This, having actually played this deck already, this is actually a really important skill. Because right now she has 2 cards in her self modification gauges. This gives her a third. You can choose to add one, but you don't have to, which is important because this deck really turns on once you start getting 4 or more gauges. Senka uses Impulsio's skill. Act Vanguard once per turn. Counterblast 1, choose a card from your drop, put it face up as your self modification gauge. The top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 grade 3 list card from among them, call it to rear guard, shuffle the deck, and this unit gets continuous. All of your front row units get plus 5k for every 2 of your self modification gauges until end of turn. The Vanguard gets that skill. So she ends up calling off the top. She calls Airborne Machinery Vinster. I've seen this card have different names, like 3 different names, because of differences in translation, but it's all basically talking about the same card. It's a grade 3. It has skills. We'll talk about that in a second. But she gives her front row 10k because she has 4 cards in her self modification gauges. She goes right into her battle phase. Senka attacks with Impuldio. Now doesn't guard. Senka gets a front trigger, gives 10k to her front row. Now takes a damage and gets no damage trigger. Senka attacks with Vinster. This is a grade 3 that she called out, and she uses its skill. It has 2 skills. I'm going to tell you both right now. Continuous rearguard. During your turn, if you have 2 or more self-modification gauges, this unit gets 5,000 power. If you have 8 or more self-modification gauges, this unit's drive cannot be decreased from card effect. That second part becomes really important, and you'll see why once we read the next effect. But as of right now, it just gains 5k. Its second effect is auto rearguard. When this unit attacks, if you have 4 or more self-modification gauges and no drive checks were performed from the battle, your rearguard attack this turn. Counterblast 1, and until end of battle, this unit performs drive checks and gets drive -1 at the end of the battle by this unit. So he swings, gains 5k, counterblast 1, gives a drive check to this unit. Now doesn't guard, and Senka actually gets a critical trigger on this new drive check. She gives the critical to Vinster, she gives the power to Nebula. Now ends up taking 2 damage. Senka attacks with Nebula, uses its skill, Soul Blast 1, gains power. Again, now doesn't guard. Now takes 1 damage. The damage is now 4-2 with Senka in the lead. Now explains that when she was trying to become a pro at Vanguard, Vanguard stopped being fun for her. She had never had a goal like that before, and because she did, it made her anxious and basically unable to enjoy the game. So now she's changed up her mentality, she's doing things a little different, and now she's playing the game just for the love of the game. So she basically tells Senka that she's going to give it her all. But turn 6 rolls around, now rides Fade 1 of Unparalleled Vanguard Divinez. She uses the skill of Boulder Axe Dragon, which when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 with Vargar in its card name, call it to rearguard. And then she calls Obdurasi Glaive Dragon behind Boulder Axe Dragon, because it has a skill that as long as you have a Vargar Vanguard, it gains boost. But now moves right into her battle phase. She attacks with Shira. She uses Shira's skill. Auto rearguard when this unit attacks, Energy Blast 2, and this unit gets 5,000 power until the end of that battle. Choose one of your rearguard with a different card name from this unit, and it gets auto when this unit is retired from the rearguard, put it into your hand. Until the end of turn. Now gives that skill to the Boulder Axe. Senka doesn't guard the first attack, takes 1 damage, then activates her Exceed system code. He puts another card into the self-modification gauge, gives her Vanguard 5k. Now then attacks with Boulder Axe, activates its second skill, Auto Rearguard when this unit attacks a Vanguard. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Vargar in its card name, this unit gets 5,000 power until the end of that battle. At the end of that battle, retire this unit, draw a card. Senka intercepts with Nebula. So Nebula has a defensive skill, Continuous Guardian Circle. If you have 4 or more self-modification gauge, this unit gets 15,000 shield. I actually really like this card. It's a beater that gets bigger when you're attacking with it, and then it also has a decent shield when you guard with it. I also like that it's not just if you intercept with this card, but if you guard with it from hand as well. That actually is a big deal. But after the battle, now retires the Boulder Axe, draws a card, and then she returns the Boulder Axe to her hand because of Shura's skill that she gave to it. Now attacks with Vargar Divinez, activates Vargar Divinez's skill. We all know what Vargar Divinez does, but just in case. Auto Vanguard once per turn, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, Counterblast 1, retire all of your and your opponent's front row rear guards, and this unit gets 10,000 power until end of turn. At the end of that battle, stay in this unit, and it gets -2 drive until end of turn. Obviously, Boulder Axe is already gone. Senka didn't have a front row because she intercepted with the Nebula, and then she retires her own Shura, and she activates Shura's skill. Auto, when this unit is retired from rear guard by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, counterblast 1, call this unit to the rear, and it gets 10,000 power until end of turn. Senka doesn't guard, now gets a critical, giving all effects to her Varga Dragras. Senka takes 2 damage, and activates System Code Exceed 2 times. So now she puts 2 more cards into the system modification gauge, and gives herself an additional 10k power. Now stands Varga, attacks Varga, now with no drive checks. Senka guards, now hesitates for a second because of the extra defense that Senka has. Looks at her hand though and realizes that her hand is not great for guarding. She decides to use her Divine Skill even though Senka has the extra power. So for the Divine Skill is Auto Vanguard. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked a grade 3 or greater unit. If your opponent's damage zone has 4 or more cards and this unit attacked 2 or more times this turn, counterblast 1, stand this unit and gets drive +2 until end of turn. She stands Varga, attacks Varga, and gets another twin drive. This time she gets a draw trigger, giving the power to Shura. My bad. I missed the fact that Senka guarded. She guarded with a Nebula from hand. So that obviously plus 15k shield. But now attacks with Shura, and Senka guards that last attack too. Damage is now 4 to 5. This time Now's in the lead. Senka gets ready to basically go for the kill. Senka Persona rides. She uses Impaldio's skill again. She puts a card from her drop into the self-modification gauge. Looks at the top 5, calls Nebula Invoke Dragon off the top 5, and gives her front row plus 20k. She calls a new Vinster from her hand, along with a Detonation Monster Bobomine and 2 copies of Gather 211. This is one of her main support cards. It's just a continuous rear guard during your turn. If you have 4 or more self-modification gauge, this unit gets 10,000 power, so there's 2 big boosters. And then she activates Impaldio's Divine Skill. Divine Act Vanguard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater and you have 4 or more self-modification gauges, counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand. This unit gets +1 critical and +2 drive until the end of that turn. It's been a while since we've seen a card have quad drive. I think the only other one is Luard right now in the game. Senka attacks with Impaldio, now guards with a perfect guard. Senka gets a heal trigger and a critical on her quad drive. She gives the 20k power and the 1 critical to Vinster, and she heals 1 damage. Senka attacks with Vinster, activates its skill. So remember, because now she has 8 cards in her self-modification gauge, it doesn't lose drive checks. So now it gets a twin drive, along with its extra 5k. It's 76 for 2 with a twin drive. Now guards with 6 cards and an intercept. 7 cards total to guard this attack. Senka does her twin drive, she gets a critical, and she gives both effects to her Nebula Invoke. She swings with her Nebula Invoke, uses its skill, so +1, gains 15k. Now is left with 2 cards in hand, and one of them happens to be a perfect card. Senka's turn ends. The damage is now 4 to 4 because she healed, and now explains that she used the Divine Skill because she knew that her hand was not going to be good for defense. Her Senka's Vanguard kept on getting stronger, and she didn't know what the Divine Skill did, so she did the best she could by going for a massive amount of defense. Because normally in that situation, especially with all the extra power, you wouldn't use Varga Dragras' Divine Skill, but she needed the cards. So now it is turn 8. It's the final turn of the match. Now Persona rides. She calls Twin Pulsive Dragon and uses its skill. Twin Pulsive Dragon is one of Varga's new cards. We already, again, had this one announced already. But what it does is when this unit is placed on rear guard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name, Energy Blast 3, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 grade 2 or less card from among them, call it to rear guard, shuffle your deck. With the skill, now calls Battle Monk of Raging Flames Rokusai and uses its skill. So Rokusai was the perfect card to call here, as Senka has another Nebula Dragon in the front row. Rokusai auto, when this card is placed on rear guard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name, your opponent cannot intercept until end of turn. So she completely shuts off Nebula's big intercept. Now ends up swapping, and then she moves into her battle phase. She attacks with Twin Pulsive Dragon. Senka doesn't guard. Senka takes 1 damage, and she gets a front trigger this time. She activates her Exceeding a card again, putting a card from her drop into the self-modification gauge, gains 5k, and she hits a front trigger, so she gives herself an additional 10k, so now her Vanguard gets plus 15k off the 1 card. Now attacks with Varga and uses its skill, gains 10k, retires her front row. Because she retires Twin Pulse of Dragon, she activates its second skill. Auto, when this unit is retired from rearguard by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard Vanguard's card name. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets 5,000 power until end of turn. Senka drops a perfect guard, and Senka basically says that it comes down to this drive check. If Now doesn't get a drive check, she loses. Sorry, if she doesn't get a trigger. Now gets a draw trigger on her twin drive and gives the power to Obdurasti Glaive, drawing another card. She then stands Varga, swings. This one Senka doesn't guard. Senka takes another damage. The game's over. Damage is 4-6. Now wins. Senka is freed from the mental pollution, but her personality doesn't change. She still wants to fight Now at her best and beat her, and she even tells Now, get stronger, come at me with 200%. And Now's like, nah, I'm going to come at you with 2,000%. And basically, their rivalry lives on. And everybody kind of points out that she hasn't really changed for being freed from the mental pollution, and it just happens to be that it's just her personality. We flash forward after the fight to Now looking at some Keter Sanctuary cards, and she's just like, I haven't seen these cards in a while. And then something stops her, and she's like, is this question mark? And then it leaves the scene, leaves us on a cliffhanger. But then it jumps over to Hikari, and she gets the message about the next fight, which is the Fated One of Miracles versus Destined One of Time, her versus Aquino. And she gives us a little hint at what her motivation is. She says, I'm going to change the past. I thought that was really, really interesting, and it makes me really wonder what her wish is and what happened to make her act this way. Anyway, guys, that's it for this episode. Interesting episode, another really Fast and Furious one. I think the cool thing about this one was it was pretty simple. Big beat sticks punching each other in the face. Impaldio is cool. It's a very interesting mechanic, especially on the defensive side. But I have some issues with it, which I will talk about when I do my own dedicated Impaldio video. So if you guys want to see that, stay tuned for the channel. But apparently the anime is on break next week. Don't worry, you guys will still get content from me, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, if you guys want to see me play Vanguard live, play with these decks live, that's Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, either twitch.tv/Savakel or right here on YouTube. I'd love to have you guys. If you guys want to check me out on social media, those links are down below. That's it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.